they need them?
I have masks.
you sit next to Tony? Why don't you? Ooh, Judge Kaplan, can you sit here? I was going to call you up right away, but it's fine. All the speakers were sitting up here, that's why. I know. Sit up here. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to our LGBTQ Pride Month celebration here at 60 Centre Street and our first annual Paul G. Feinman Award ceremony. I just want to say a couple quick thank yous before we get into the program. First of all, to all the terrific staff here at 60 Centre Street, especially Michelle, who I can't, oh, back there. Michelle has made today possible. Indeed. The folks from IT who are in the back who are making it possible for many, many more people to watch this at their computer. I send greetings from my upstate co-chair, Justice Winslow, who is with us today in spirit. Also from Judge Feinman's husband, Robert, who also couldn't be here today, but is also with us in spirit. I want to thank our other DCAJ, Norman St. George, for joining us today. First Department Justice Angela Mazzarelli. Justice Arlene Bluth from here in the building. One of our newest Court of Claims judges, Javier Vargas. And a member of the Failla Commission, retired Judge Michael Somberg. A lot of folks here from leadership from OCA, Nancy Berry, Justin Berry. Thank you guys for coming. We've got a series of speakers here today who I'm so thankful, who are going to share some reflections on Pride Month and Judge Feinman. And first up, we have the DCAJ for the New York City Courts, no stranger to this building, Judge Deborah Kaplan.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today, those of you in person, as well as those of you who are watching this event remotely. Thank you to the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission of the New York Courts, Chairs Judge Anthony Cannataro, Judge Joanne M. Winslow, and Director Matt Skinner for putting together the program today and for giving me the opportunity to say just a few words. I spoke several months ago at the Court of Appeals when Judge Feinman's portrait was unveiled. And I observed then that while the beautifully rendered portrait was certainly a lovely tribute to Paul, we did not need a portrait to remember him. Although I do note, for those of you who have not yet had a chance, the picture is on your program. Paul's the only one up there with a smile across his face on those walls in that much revered courtroom. Nor do we actually need an award in Judge Feinman's name or a courtroom dedicated to him as Room 300, the ceremonial courtroom here at 60 Centre Street, will be later this year, because for the painful fact is for those of us who knew Paul Feinman, we can't forget him, not even for a moment. And nevertheless, I hope that all that is named in Judge Feinman's honor will signal to those who were not lucky enough to know him that he was the noblest of individuals. He was a man who was revered, cherished, and loved deeply. He has been characterized aptly as a, quote, beacon of light in the LGBTQ community and a fierce advocate for human rights. He has been described as kind, giving, gentle, and a humble person. And I am most grateful for Judge Feinman's loyalty, empathy, warmth, and humor, all of which he had in great abundance and shared. As we are well aware, Judge Feinman attained so much in his life, including a seat on our state's highest court. He was so honored and so incredibly excited to be part of that distinguished select group of justices, especially the Chief Judge, but I am certain that despite Paul's humility, he really belonged there. And Judge Feinman's unparalleled intellect, keen wit, and fierce dedication to the true administration of justice is the stuff of legend. Paul loved the law. Paul loved learning it. He loved debating it. He loved interpreting it and loved writing about it. And we love reading his erudite words. So I talk about this with Judge Mazzarelli a lot, but I think of Paul just about every day. And he's never really far from my thoughts, because for so many years, I look to him for advice, support, just laughter, and I can't stop seeking him out. And I've said it before, and it remains true to this day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think I want to reach for the phone and call Paul to ask his opinion or just tell him about something that's happened or something funny about someone we knew or some good news or bad news, just to call him. And the pain I experience when I remember that I will never again hear his voice on the other end of the line is unbearable. Still, I take great comfort in the fact that I had the great good fortune to have known Paul Feinman so well and have been the beneficiary of his friendships and love. So I think today it is incredibly fitting that Judge Adam Silvera is the recipient of the first Paul G. Feinman Award. Judge Silvera, likewise, is thoughtful, energetic, responsive, and exceedingly hardworking. For those of you who know Adam, you know he has an incredibly quick wit and an enormous heart. And he has become a most able and respected leader within our court family. But most importantly, Judge Silvera is dedicated to the rule of law and equal justice for all. Adam, congratulations on this well-deserved honor, and again, thank you for the privilege of allowing me to speak today. I'm very honored to participate in this important event.
Thank you so much, Judge. We now have a series of members of the Failla Commission that are sitting Manhattan judges to share some further remarks. First up is Justice Franc Perry.
Good afternoon. To my fellow members of the Failla Commission, to our OCA personnel who continue to support us, to our DCAJs, to our Chief Justice, I thank you for this opportunity. My heart is heavy, but I want to say a few words about my friend who we recognize in establishing an award in his name today. I first met Paul in the 1990s when I was a court attorney with the Appellate Term First Department here in this courthouse. Someone in this room tried to set me up with Paul. We met at the chicest place to meet in 60 Centre Street, the library. While discussing the pros and cons of shepherdizing, we realized that we would not be partners, we would be friends. When we first became friends, I got a glimpse of the spirit of a unique person who was funny and who was incredibly smart. Our friendship grew because, for some strange reason, the boy liked to hear me sing. So he would come to my cabaret gigs and applaud and applaud and applaud. I even sang at his Supreme Court induction, and I'm still today wondering why. His rise to the Court of Appeals was not surprising, as he knew that in order to dwell and lead authentically in the lofty heights, he had to spend time with the lowly and the meek. He believed this, and because of this, he was truly honorable. Many of us in this room today have been deemed honorable by virtue of our positions and titles. However, I wonder just how many of us know what it is to live an honorable life. Paul possessed the well-known qualities attributable to such designation. He possessed high principles. He was honest, sometimes to a fault. Let's not talk about wearing white shoes after Labor Day. He was fair, and the manner in which he comported himself demanded respect. He didn't have to yell, intimidate, demean, or insult, because he knew that those acts garnered only fear, not regret. He earned the respect by the way he engaged the less fortunate, the underrepresented, the newcomer, and those in the twilight of their years. He and I had running jokes between us, and one of them was we would develop a Southern accent and talk about what was going on in the world in our Southern dialogue. The man could say child like there was nobody's business. Through those years of joy and laughter, hard work and tenacity, circumventing the murky waters of the political life, becoming a judge, he maintained and retained his honor. I'm going to be bold right now and say something that many might not agree with, I hope you all agree with, that Paul would have been deemed an honorable man had he not become a judge. Because being a judge did not make him honorable. Being Paul made him honorable. He lived with his honor. He loved with his honor. He pursued his profession with his honor. He served the people of the state of New York with honor, and he died with honor, dignity, and grace. When I was first elected to the Supreme Court, I got a call from Paul, yelling, "You're first." I'm like, there was no one running against me. What are you talking about? I was first. No, Frankie, you're first. And I didn't realize what that meant. He says, you are the first openly gay African-American person ever elected to the Supreme Court in the history of the state of New York. You're first. Today, Adam, you're a first. And you wear it well. After his appointment to the Court of Appeals, I began to call him Your Honor. He said, Your Honor, Your Shmana. That's when he displayed to me the most important attribute of being honorable, humility. I said, child, you earned it. He said, most of the time, you don't need all that stuff that comes with being out there. But sometimes a nice boutonniere and an acknowledgement does the trick. Paul, you've made all of us want to be honorable in your name. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Adam.
Thank you so much. We now have the surrogate for New York County, Rita Mella.
Yes, I am one of the surrogates in New York County, and I am so happy to be here. It is a real pleasure, and thank you, Matt, for asking me to speak. I am also a proud member of the Failla Commission. And when I say proud, I mean proud. Like I tell everyone, whether they ask me or not, that I am a member of the commission. I just volunteer the information, left and right. And the reason I'm so proud is because I am excited to do good work with such a diverse and dynamic group of people. There are judges in the commission, of course, and they come from different courts and from all levels, appellate, trial, and from all over the state. Practitioners, court administrators, law professors, civil rights lawyers, and activists are also members of the commission, and again, they come from all over the state. Since January of 2017, when we had our first meeting, we've been working towards the goal of promoting equal access to the courts and equal participation throughout the court system by all persons, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. First, under the leadership of co-chairs Justice Marcy Can and Justice Elizabeth Gary, and now under the current co-chairs, Justice Anthony Cannataro and Justice Joanne Winslow, we've worked on important projects. For example, we secured an amendment to several court rules, including the attorney rules of professional conduct, to add gender identity and gender expression to the anti-discrimination provisions of those rules. We proposed language to be added to the drug court urine collection and testing protocols to protect the privacy of transgender drug court participants. We also insisted on the display of proper signs to make clear that any court user or court employee can use the bathroom of their choice in our courthouses. Those are just 3 examples of the important work that we've been doing since we started working on the commission. One of the highlights of my membership in the Failla Commission was that I got to be in the same room and work with Justice Paul Feinman. What a treat that was. Justice Feinman was a great commissioner. 2 things stood out for me from the beginning: his presence and his clear thinking. He was an Appellate Division First Department Justice when we first came together as a commission, and then he was appointed to the Court of Appeals. So he had a pretty busy schedule throughout the years, and he rarely missed a meeting. And if he was going to miss it, he always let us know ahead of time. Whether he was speaking about the importance of putting together training programs for judges and court personnel so that we could better serve LGBTQ court users, which was something that he felt very, very strongly about, or whether he was explaining the proper use of the pronoun they, even in judicial opinions, to refer to an individual, his participation was always remarkable. I had met Paul many, many years ago when I first decided to pursue a judgeship through the election route. Attending those political events can be a very difficult thing, especially if you are a shy person like I am. It was hard, but I could count on Paul to offer a smile or a piece of advice that seemed to come always at the right time. When I was elected to the civil court, but assigned to the criminal court, he made a point of finding me to tell me about a few things that I needed to know in order to enjoy the work there. And he was right about those things, by the way, and I loved the years that I worked at 100 Centre Street. He sent me notes whenever I was celebrating a milestone, and he found out about it. And that was Paul, always there, always present. He is very much missed. Another person who was there for me during those first years when I was trying to be elected as a judge was Adam Silvera, now known as Justice Adam Silvera, the administrative judge of this courthouse. In other words, the big boss. Back then, he was Adam, and he was the most gracious and most supportive district leader that a judicial candidate could find. He was always willing to nominate you at the judicial convention or meeting of the district leaders, or to take your call if you had a question about the complex process of judicial elections. Adam was there for you, just like Paul Feinman had been. And that's why I also think that it's very fitting that Justice Silvera is receiving the Justice Feinman Award today. Like Justice Feinman, Justice Silvera has made it his business to help others. And thanks to them, we have a more inclusive and more diverse judiciary in New York State. On behalf of the members of the Failla Commission, congratulations, Justice Silvera, on receiving this recognition. And thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now we have the Supervising Judge of New York County Family Court, Karen Lupuloff.
So everyone, hi. I'm going to speak a little bit differently because I'm going to tell you my coming out story. I see in my head right now that Paul, whose name is a blessing, is sitting up in heaven with my mother and father, whose names are also a blessing. I know my parents would love Paul. I hope Paul would love my parents. So here's my story. I grew up on a small chicken farm, kosher chicken farm, in a small town in New Jersey. My parents were liberal, open-minded people. They took my brother and me to see Shirley Chisholm speak when she ran for president. We listened to the speeches of Martin Luther King on the record player. Open, liberal, active members of our community were my parents, and that's how they raised my brother and me to be. In my synagogue, it got to the point when I would come back for the high holidays during college and law school. I was at one point the remaining single young woman in my synagogue, to the point where people would come up to me and say, "Nu, where's the husband? Where's the ring?" Anyway, when I moved to New York, I dated virtually every single Jewish man in Manhattan. It is a fact. And what's also a fact is that I fell in love with a Catholic woman. I went to my very liberal, very open mother and father and told them I was gay and told them I was in love. My parents immediately shut the door, locked me out, refused to let me come home to our farm, refused to let me go to our synagogue, refused to let me speak to my relatives. My mother, back in the days of answering machines, for those my age who know about answering machines, she would leave message on my answering machine telling me that I was killing her, telling me that I was ruining her life, telling me how ashamed she was. At the same time, though, my parents were speaking to others about their daughter, Karen, the successful prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office. We're so proud of her. Yet I could not go home, I could not speak to my family. So I'm sure there's at least one other person in this room who has had that experience of a bifurcated life, because my life indeed became bifurcated. I was in love, I had friends, I was living in New York, I was establishing myself, I was accepted, I was proud, and I was out. But to my family, I was dead. Years later, when my now wife and I decided that we were going to have a baby, I wrote my parents a letter, and I said, "Mom and Dad, you have a chance to be a grandmother and a grandfather. But in order to be a grandfather and a grandmother to the girl we're about to adopt from China, you have to accept us with open arms." A few months after that, my father called me and asked to meet with me and my partner. We actually secretly went to a rest stop off the Jersey Turnpike, because that's where you go for secret rendezvous. And my father spent an hour with my now wife and me. My mother never learned of that, never learned of that. Anyway, about a year after that, when our daughter came home from China, I reached out to my parents again and I said, "You have a granddaughter if you want one." That started to melt the ice. It took a baby. Little by little, my parents came around. They got to know their granddaughter. By this point, they had moved off the farm into one of the thousands of retirement communities in New Jersey. And in the winter, when the other snowbirds weren't around, we were allowed to come for the afternoon, my bride, me, and our daughter, to visit. My mother would take out the pictures of us and take out the pictures of our little girl, and as we were leaving, she would put them back in the drawer. Baby steps, baby steps. Years later, fast forward, my parents became very close with our daughter, and actually even closer to my now wife than to me. Put her on the phone. I'd like to speak to her. But Mom, it's me. Put her on the phone. I'd like to speak to her. We took it. One year, my parents went with me to high holiday services at the gay synagogue. And that, back in the day, so we're even talking about a long time ago now, but back in the day, there were bathrooms at the Javits Center that were entitled straight, gay, trans. My mother needed to use the ladies' room, and of course, she doesn't know what trans means. That's the bathroom she uses. And I remember all my life, my mother coming out and telling me how beautifully the women were all dressed in their beautiful, and I said, Mom, do you know what it means to be trans? No, I just know they dress beautifully. I'll take it. Over the years, my parents really did warm up. When the Supreme Court said that my wife and I could marry, even though I presided over weddings for others, but when they finally said, okay, Lupuloff, guess what, you could marry too, we did, and my mother and father were there. Years later, when my father passed, knowing that the members of our synagogue growing up would be there, knowing that my family, who we already reconnected with, would be there, my mother let me give a eulogy. My mother let me introduce everyone to my wife and to my daughter. Baby steps, but we got there. And when my mother passed away, just a couple of years ago, everybody from our synagogue was there again, but they already knew us, welcomed us with open arms. We got there. So I tell this story because I know there's at least one of you out there who had this sort of parallel path to your life. It was more than a few years of really severe pain because I was the good girl, right? I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I was the good girl. I was at the DA's office, I was in law, I was, good. But for several years, I was really dead to my parents. So it took them a while to come around, and I understand that it took them a while, and I'm glad they finally got there. But I'll end this by saying, to my mother and father, may you rest in peace, and to the Supreme Court of these United States, no one will ever tell me who I could love. No one will ever tell me what's right about who I love. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make say one other thing before we move to the actual award. Last month, I happened to be reading the New York Times, and a lot of you probably saw it. There was an article about Ed Koch and the fact that he was probably gay, but unfortunately never came out during his life. I don't bring this up to bring up this to talk about Ed Koch, but there was, as you scroll through the article, they included a photo of him that is obviously, very ironic given what the article. And as I looked at the picture that morning, it was a Saturday morning, I noticed that it's on the back of your program if you're sitting here in person, and I'm told they're going to show it to people watching online. There's a picture of this guy, Richard Failla, sort of in a, waving to the crowd. And I just think this really speaks to the themes that all the speakers have talked about this morning of perseverance and bravery and being authentic. And the only pictures I've ever seen of him, and this is someone whose name I've written 100, typed 100 times a day for the past 5 years, are these sort of more reserved, judicial portrait that we have on our website. But this was sort of the first photo I've seen of him, in a Pride March, looking really fired up, walking down Fifth Avenue. There's also the picture on the other side, the guy on the other side of the mayor is Bill Tom. And some of you might remember 4 years ago this week, we brought Bill Tom right here and gave him, we didn't have a name for our award at that time, but we gave Bill Tom a plaque. And I just think, one sort of caveat to the sort of the thesis of this article was it was impossible basically to be out in the 80s. And I wish there was a little asterisk or a caption for this photo, because the asterisk is there were some really brave, before we had city council members or state legislators or people running for president, there were openly gay judges here in this borough before any of that. And it's just amazing to me, when I try to wrap my head around the level of bravery and courage that sort of this little photo just speaks to. And I'm hoping I can get the New York Times to run a correction or something and put their names in here, because I do think it's a little asterisk to the thesis that they were trying to propound in this article about how impossible it was to be out. And they were followed by some very brave women as well that followed them. Marcy Kahn, our founding co-chair, Joan Lobis, Roz Richter, and we've gone all around the state the last few weeks, as my co-chair and Judge St. George could attest to. We've been everywhere. This isn't to by any means cast aspersions on the rest of the state, but in many ways the story did start here in this county, this borough, this courthouse, and I'm so glad that we're now carrying forth that legacy this morning with our first Judge Feinman Award. And Paul, I hope, is sitting on a cloud right now, as Judge Kaplan has said at other of our ceremonies, smiling down at all of us. So proud of what he accomplished and what all of us will continue to accomplish. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair for the presentation of the award.
Thank you, Matt. Happy Pride, everyone. I appreciate that historical perspective that Matt just gave us. We do this program annually, and it's to recognize how far we as an LGBTQ community have come, how far we have still to go. And I think a vital part of that also is always a good coming out story. So thanks, Judge Lupuloff, for your coming out story. I think we should have those, at least a couple of them, at every one of these events. Before I launch into my remarks formal, I just want to say I was texting with Justice Silvera a little bit this morning, and he said to me at one point during our conversation that he was feeling nervous about today, which I thought was completely preposterous. Because this is all about Judge Silvera today. We're here to appreciate him, and to be honest, as Matt mentioned a couple seconds ago, I've been traveling around the state quite a bit the past week and a half, 2 weeks or so, celebrating Pride all around. I was with Justice St. George out in Suffolk last week, and been doing appearances all around, and I haven't been nervous at all at any of those events, strangely enough. But when I got off the 5 train and walked out and saw this courthouse, I was completely struck with fear. And I'm still feeling it. My hands are shaking. And I think that's because I didn't realize it at the time, but this is home. Everywhere else I went, I was just some judge from Albany who was coming to speak, and I was in and out, and it was pretty easy. And you all know me. We've all worked together, and it's a little scary. So I'm going to keep my remarks brief, and I'm going to focus them on Adam. But before I do, part of the problem with going away is that my mind gets a little stuck in the past. To me, this beautiful building, 60 Centre Street, is still Justice Kaplan's house. And Justice St. George is the AJ from Nassau County, and Judge Silvera is in the asbestos part. So let me just properly acknowledge our Deputy Chief Administrative Judges, Kaplan, and thank you for having us, and Justice St. George. And here's something else, and this is why I love Adam, because no matter how long he stays a judge, and we know that he is the picture of impartiality and fairness on the bench, he still has the best political instincts, because he's the only one that I could see for myself. Notice that I'm not the only Court of Appeals judge in this room today. And Judge Silvera clocked it the second the other judge came in. I'm not going to acknowledge my senior associate, not because I don't love him, but because I'm going to let Judge Silvera do that. So what I wanted to say about this event is that it feels just so right, Adam. Here we are on the eve of Pride Weekend in New York City, in the home of Judge Feinman, surrounded by the people who knew and loved Paul the very best, honoring a judge who so perfectly represents the same qualities that made Judge Feinman such a revered and beloved member of the New York State Bench. And if that wasn't enough, the award we bestow today is going to someone, Justice Adam Silvera, who is not just a colleague, but a good friend of Judge Feinman's as well. I cannot think of a better way to kick off what I hope will be a long tradition of honoring the memory of Paul Feinman than by giving the Failla Commission's inaugural Paul G. Feinman Award to Justice Adam Silvera. When the idea of creating an award named after Judge Feinman, one of the Failla LGBTQ Commission's original commissioners and the pride of our community on the bench, when that idea was floated, the hope was, or at least my hope was, that the Feinman Award would be given to an individual who displayed the characteristics that made Paul so unique among judges. And I'm not just talking about characteristics like love of the law or being an outstanding jurist. I'm talking about Paul's approachability, his legendary humility, his willingness to engage with all sorts of people, Judge Perry mentioned that, and to help them achieve their professional and personal goals in any way that he could offer assistance. That's as good a description of what made Paul Feinman so special among judges, but it also describes Justice Silvera to a T. Simply stated, Adam Silvera is one of the most personable and caring judges I have ever met. He loves the law, obviously, but he also cares deeply about the courts, and he genuinely likes judges, which are qualities that can be a little more difficult to find these days. And like many in this room today, I got to know Adam Silvera before he became a judge. He was a fixture in the world of judicial candidates long before he took the bench. In those days, everyone in Manhattan who wanted to become a judge knew who Adam Silvera was, and it was always a smart move for any candidate to get to know Adam and earn his good opinion and maybe some of his advice. And for so many of us, Adam was always willing to help. In this regard, he is just like Paul. I have no doubt we could line up at least 10 more speakers from right here in this room who have stories about how Adam helped them realize their dream of becoming a judge. It's 1:15 and we're not going to do that, but I know we could do it if we wanted to. And I personally remember a phone call that I received from Adam in the spring of 2011, right before I was about to interview with the New York Times editorial board for their endorsement in my race for the New York City Civil Court. Mind you, I did not call Adam to beg for his advice. Adam called me to offer his advice and good wishes. And that right there is what makes him so special. He is incredibly generous of spirit. And as stressful as that particular experience was for me at the time, Adam's advice was spot on and completely helpful, and I got the endorsement, Adam, and I'm sure it was all thanks to you. That caring and personal touch that citizen Adam Silvera displayed in the days before he became a judge stayed with him when he became a judge himself in 2013. They've stayed with Judge Silvera throughout his wildly successful career, first as a civil court judge, a Supreme Court justice, a justice of the appellate term, and they are amply on display now in his new office as administrative judge for Manhattan. I've personally spoken with many attorneys and judges over the years who have had dealings with Justice Silvera, and even more so since he became the AJ. And in Judge Silvera, they find a patient listener, a caring administrator, and an individual of consummate goodwill, thoughtfulness, and definitely good humor. In short, Adam Silvera is a mensch. He always has been, and he always will be. I could go on for much, much longer extolling Judge Silvera's virtues, and I could tell some really great stories, but awards need to be handed out, and we absolutely must hear from Justice Silvera. To my dear friend Adam, let me just say thank you for making the decision about who should get the inaugural Paul G. Feinman Award so easy for the Failla Commission to make. You really do represent the very best of us, and we are proud to have you as part of our community and as a friend to all of us. And I know Judge Feinman would be so pleased to see you receive this award today. So Justice Silvera, on behalf of a grateful and admiring Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission of the New York State Courts, please accept the first ever Paul G. Feinman Award.
Wow. Okay. I was hoping there'd be some more speakers so I could have more time to think about what I'd add or subtract from my speech, but this is overwhelming. I am truly appreciative, and I'm honored and humbled today by this recognition, and really appreciative of everybody that's here, my colleagues from so many different courts, from all over the state. I'd like to recognize DCAJ from, I can never get these titles correct, from the courts. Well, you're the DCAJ within the New York City. That's easy, that's easy. I deal with her every day, so I know her title. If I don't, then I'm in trouble. Outside New York City, from the state, well, okay. Thank you for being here. The Honorable Norman St. George, thank you. I'm truly grateful to all my colleagues that are here in person, the court family. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for all of the chief clerk's office that's here, all the court family, my friends, my family that can't be here today that's watching live stream. Thank you, Tony, for those kind and generous remarks. Thank you to all the speakers, Surrogate Mella, Judge Perry, Judge Lupuloff, who knows me too well, as she was my former supervising judge in family court, and she works night and day in her job, and thank you for all the work you do. I truly want to thank the Chief Judge and acknowledge her dynamic leadership, Chief Judge DiFiore, her visionary leadership in running the courts, especially during the past 2 years, which have been a very difficult time. I really wish to thank her for her tireless efforts. I want to acknowledge the dedicated members of the Failla Commission and its co-chairs, Judge Winslow and Judge Cannataro, and its executive director, Matt Skinner. I'm extremely grateful for the kind words of our DCAJ New York New York's hometown favorite, Deborah Kaplan. I know how important this day is for you because you've enjoyed a very close, special relationship with Judge Feinman for many, 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 it spanned many, many, many years. We're honored to have you here today. And I continue to learn so much from you, and the New York City court system is in great hands with you at the helm, and thank you. I thank you for your support and your continued guidance. I also want to acknowledge, yes, Tony, he peeked over my shoulders. Is that how you got such a great score in your SAT?
I just leaned over to say Rowan Wilson is here, and I saw the
All right, okay. So I want to acknowledge our esteemed member of the Court of Appeals, the Honorable Rowan Wilson is here. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the Dean. We officially coined that phrase last week, the Dean of the First Department, the Honorable Angela Mazzarelli. A trailblazer in her own right, who did an outstanding job mentoring and nurturing Judge Feinman. Thank you, Justice Mazzarelli, for being here. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much. I had the good fortune of meeting Judge Feinman in 1996 when he ran for civil court judge. And for those of you who may know or may not know, it almost didn't happen for him in 1996. It was a very, very tense, heated primary in Lower Manhattan. I think he won like by 26 votes. 24, 20, okay, Judge Mazzarelli's correcting me, 24. It went down to the wire, counting every vote, absentees, challenges. It went to the courts, but he won. And I remember his mom was campaigning in Southbridge Towers, all over the place. His family were his biggest supporters. He was out there every day. Tom Duane, Deborah Glick, VID, everyone was out there for him. He ran a campaign the old-fashioned way, knocked on doors, telephone calls, direct mail, you name it. He won. And when you met him, you knew he was a star. You knew he was going places. Our paths crossed, and when I became a lawyer, I appeared before him when he was in the city part. He was assigned at 80 Centre Street, and I appeared before him when he was in the general IAS part at 111 Center. And he was just spectacular. He was preaching e-filing at 80 Center in front of a packed room of lawyers, and they were like a bunch of dinosaurs. They weren't giving him any mind, but he was like, this is like the early thousands, and he's preaching e-file, e-file, e-file. And they're like, could we just get our orders signed? We just want to get our discovery order signed. And he's like, no, you're going to listen to me. And I'm going to teach you about e-file, whether you like it or not. And look how successful e-file is today. There's not one lawyer or judge that doesn't appreciate what e-file is. So he was extremely visionary, and he was incredible. He knew how to settle cases. He knew how to take the hardest, most difficult lawyers, and he knew how to unravel them, and cases just magically settled. He treated everybody with fairness, dignity, and respect. And when I became a judge, he reached out to me. He was so wonderful. He appreciated that I immediately volunteered. He didn't even have to ask. I immediately volunteered for the Hank Henry project every summer. For those of you that don't know, Hank Henry is a program where LGBTQ judges are asked to volunteer with LGBT summer interns, law student interns, to volunteer as interns, and I volunteered every year. Loved getting his thank you notes, his holiday wishes, and we shared something in common that we both enjoyed when we would get to see each other, which wasn't always so often, but we loved speaking French, and his French was way better than mine. He studied in Sorbonne. Mine was 4 years of French high school, and my father being a native French speaker, and although my mother wasn't, so I didn't learn it at home. I picked it up in high school, and my father hated my accent. And he would constantly correct me, and I said, well, had you started at me at birth, we wouldn't be having this argument. Although after a glass of red wine, my accent would go from Lower East Side to perhaps Canada, although Paul's accent was almost Parisian or practically Parisian. But we would always try to get in a nice number of sentences in French, and we bonded that way. And I learned a lot from him. And in a blink of an eye, he wound up on the Appellate Division and the Court of Appeals. As we all know, there's no doubt he was a trailblazer because he learned from the very own trailblazer and Judge Mazzarelli. But what is a trailblazer? By definition, a trailblazer really makes it easier for those who follow in the footsteps of a trailblazer. And he made it easy for LGBTQ plus judges and attorneys like myself to practice and to be standing here today, right now. He was on the front line. And although he handled these challenges with dignity and grace, it was not easy for him, and it could not have been easy for him. He's the one that took on the obstacles. He confronted the prejudices and the discrimination. He rolled up his sleeves and did the hard work so that we could all benefit today. And we must continue to earn the privilege that trailblazers like Judge Feinman created. Not to do this is a disservice to his memory, and I feel a tremendous obligation to continue his effort now more than ever. So each time when I look at this award and recognition today, it will serve as a reminder to something I hope I will never take for granted. So in conclusion, today, I share this award today with all of my colleagues, those who have sacrificed and overcome for the cause like Judge Feinman, Judge Kahn, Judge Richter, Judge Lobis, Judge Failla, and I apologize, Judge Sonberg, and those and many, many others. Forgive me, I'm missing. There's so many that I could name that I'm not naming. And their efforts have paved the way so the courts could be a place of equity, fairness, and acceptance. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Matt, does that conclude our program? That concludes our program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
I love this.